Introduction. What if everything we know about consciousness is only a fraction of a much deeper truth? Hidden theories, rejected, silenced, or simply forgotten, suggest that the mind is far more mysterious than science dares to admit. Tonight, we'll explore the forbidden theories of consciousness, ideas that blur the line between reality and illusion, between the universe and the self. So, put on your headphones, relax, and let your mind wander beyond the known. The simulation hypothesis. There is a theory that suggests our entire reality, everything we see, feel, and think, might not be as real as we believe. The simulation hypothesis proposes that the universe and everything within it, including human consciousness, could be part of a vast artificial simulation. This idea gained traction in the early 2000s when philosopher Nick Bostrom from Oxford University introduced his famous argument that it is statistically more likely we are living in a simulated reality than in an original physical universe. According to the hypothesis, if advanced civilizations in the future gain the technological capability to simulate entire worlds, including conscious beings within them, it would only take a small number of such simulations for the odds to favor that we are not the original reality, but one of countless copies. In this framework, our thoughts, emotions, and even our perception of time might simply be complex lines of code running on unimaginable computational systems. What we perceive as physical laws could, in fact, be the programming rules of this vast simulation. Some scientists and technologists have speculated that if this were true, certain anomalies in physical constants or unexplained cosmic phenomena could serve as signs of the underlying digital structure. Concepts like pixelation in spacetime or measurable limits to the universe's resolution have been discussed as potential clues, though no definitive evidence has ever been found. Still, the hypothesis continues to intrigue philosophers, physicists, and computer scientists alike, not for what it proves, but for what it challenges, the very foundation of what we call real. Within this theory, consciousness itself plays a central role. If the universe is simulated, then human awareness could be part of the program, existing only as data streams interpreted by some higher-level system. But even within a simulation, consciousness would still feel real, because for the mind experiencing it, the sensation of being is the only undeniable truth. The question of whether that awareness originates from a biological brain or from a computational process becomes almost irrelevant. What matters is the continuity of experience. In a simulated framework, history, evolution, and even cosmic events could have been generated, pre-coded, or adjusted for observation. The Big Bang, the formation of galaxies, and the emergence of life might all be artificial sequences in a designed environment meant to follow coherent physical laws. Some versions of the theory suggest that the creators, whoever or whatever they are, could be studying the development of societies, consciousness, or ethics within their simulated worlds. Others see this possibility as a new form of metaphysics, replacing ancient beliefs in divine creation with a technologically driven origin story. The simulation hypothesis also introduces a subtle philosophical paradox. If reality can be simulated with enough precision that its inhabitants cannot distinguish it from the original, then there may be no meaningful difference between real and simulated. Experience would remain authentic to those living it. Pain, love, curiosity, and fear would still hold the same weight, regardless of whether their source is organic or digital. The awareness of being, the feeling of existence, would continue to define reality from within. For some thinkers, this concept redefines the boundaries of consciousness. If human minds can create simulations with increasingly realistic environments, as seen in the rapid progress of artificial intelligence and virtual reality, then perhaps the very act of creating simulated life mirrors the process that gave rise to our own existence. The universe, in that sense, becomes self-referential, a chain of creators and creations, each existing within the other. While modern science cannot confirm or disprove the simulation hypothesis, it has already changed how people think about consciousness and reality. It has introduced a new layer of humility, reminding us that the universe might be deeper and more complex than our senses suggest. Whether the theory is true or not, it forces us to reconsider what existence really means. The pixels of reality may never reveal their edges, but the thought that they might exist opens the door to one of the most profound reflections on the nature of consciousness and the illusion of the world we call home. Panpsychism. There exists an ancient yet persistently modern idea that consciousness is not limited to humans, animals, or even living beings. It suggests that awareness is a fundamental feature of the universe itself, woven into the very fabric of matter. This idea is known as Panpsychism. It claims that everything, from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy, possesses some primitive form of consciousness. Not intelligence, not thought in the human sense, but an inner aspect, a point of awareness that exists alongside physical structure. This concept reaches far back into philosophy. The Greek thinker Thales, often regarded as one of the first philosophers, once said that everything is full of gods. Later, thinkers like Spinoza and Leibniz refined the notion, proposing that mind and matter are not separate substances but two expressions of the same reality. In the modern age, Panpsychism re-emerged as a response to the hard problem of consciousness, the question of how subjective experience arises from physical processes in the brain. Rather than explaining how matter generates mind, Panpsychism turns the idea around. It proposes that matter was never truly mindless to begin with. At its core, this theory suggests that consciousness is not something that suddenly appeared when life evolved, but rather something that has always been present, even in the simplest forms of existence. Electrons, quarks, and photons, these tiny units of the physical world, might each possess their own faint, almost imperceptible form of experience. When matter combines into complex systems, such as the human brain, these micro-experiences could merge into a single, unified field of awareness. This view transforms consciousness from an evolutionary accident into a fundamental property of reality. Philosophers like Alfred North Whitehead and, more recently, Galen Strawson have championed this idea. They argue that the division between the mental and the physical is an illusion, created by our limited human perception. According to them, every atom, every grain of sand, every drop of water, carries within it a spark of subjective presence. These sparks are not intelligent in the way humans are. They do not think, plan, or remember. Instead, they form the basic ingredients of experience, the same way particles form the ingredients of matter. Consciousness, in this framework, is not an emergent property of the brain but a continuation of something much older and more universal. In the panpsychist view, the universe itself becomes alive, not metaphorically but literally. The stars, the oceans, the rocks, and the air around us all participate in a grand field of interconnected awareness. Human consciousness is simply a concentrated point within this ocean of perception. We do not stand apart from nature. We are expressions of it, fragments of its inner life. This idea offers a sense of unity that many find deeply comforting. It dissolves the harsh boundary between the living and the non-living, between subject and object, suggesting that the world itself is not a machine but a continuous web of experience. From a scientific perspective, panpsychism remains speculative, but it has begun to attract serious attention from physicists and philosophers of mind. Some have noted that certain aspects of quantum mechanics, where observation seems to affect reality, may hint at a world in which consciousness plays a fundamental role. Others have pointed out that the search for a neural seat of consciousness has so far failed to find a single, definitive location in the brain, perhaps because consciousness does not originate from a specific structure at all, but from the combined organization of matter and information. In this sense, the mind might not emerge from neurons alone, but from the very arrangement of energy and space. Panpsychism does not claim that every object has a mind like ours. A stone does not plan its future, and an atom does not dream. Instead, each possesses a minute form of interiority, a subjective side that complements its physical being. When countless such entities come together, their experiences may blend into more complex forms of awareness, much like individual notes combine to form harmony. This continuity between the simplest and most advanced forms of consciousness creates a seamless bridge across existence, connecting every level of being. For many who contemplate this theory, panpsychism offers an elegant solution to one of the greatest mysteries in philosophy. If consciousness were truly an emergent phenomenon, born only from biological systems, it would remain inexplicably separate from the rest of the universe. But if consciousness is inherent in matter itself, then no special divide exists between mind and world. The human experience becomes part of a cosmic pattern, not a lonely exception to it. This perspective also changes how we perceive life and death. If awareness is a universal feature of matter, then it never fully disappears, it only transforms. The atoms that once formed a person continue their existence elsewhere, perhaps carrying with them the faintest echoes of experience. In this view, consciousness is not extinguished, but redistributed. It flows through the endless cycles of creation and decay, just as energy does, obeying the quiet rhythm of the cosmos. Panpsychism stands at the intersection of science, philosophy, and spirituality, without fully belonging to any one of them. It does not require faith, but it invites reflection. It does not seek to prove, but to reveal a different way of seeing the universe, one in which everything participates in the mystery of being. The stars above, the earth beneath, the particles within us, all share the same silent essence. Through this lens, consciousness ceases to be a human privilege and becomes a universal property. It is not something we possess, but something we are, a continuation of the same awareness that has existed since the beginning of time. Quantum consciousness. Among the most controversial and captivating theories of the mind lies the idea that consciousness itself may be a quantum phenomenon. Known as quantum consciousness, this hypothesis suggests that the roots of awareness are not purely biological or chemical, but instead emerge from quantum processes that take place deep within the brain. At first glance, the connection between quantum physics and the human mind may seem improbable. One deals with subatomic particles, probabilities, and the strange behaviors of energy and space. The other with thought, emotion, and subjective experience. Yet, according to this theory, they are two sides of the same mystery. The most well-known formulation of this idea was developed by physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff in the 1990s. Together, they proposed a model called Orchestrated Objective Reduction, or Orch-OR. Their work suggested that consciousness arises not from ordinary electrical activity between neurons, but from quantum events occurring inside microscopic structures known as microtubules. These tiny filaments, found within the brain's neurons, are thought to act as channels capable of sustaining quantum coherence, allowing particles to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Within this hidden architecture, they believed, the physical and mental worlds converge. According to Penrose and Hameroff, the brain is not merely a biological computer processing data through chemical reactions. It is instead a quantum system, where consciousness results from the collapse of quantum states into a single, unified experience. This collapse, what physicists call objective reduction, is not random but orchestrated by the geometry of space-time itself. In this view, consciousness is not something generated by matter but a process deeply embedded in the structure of the universe. Each moment of awareness, each flicker of perception, is tied to a fundamental change in the fabric of reality. This interpretation bridges the gap between physics and metaphysics in a way that few scientific theories dare to attempt. It implies that consciousness and the universe are not separate entities but participants in a shared process of unfolding. The brain, under this model, becomes an instrument through which the universe observes itself. Quantum states in microtubules form, persist, and collapse, producing flashes of awareness that we experience as thoughts, sensations, and intentions. When many such events occur in harmony, the stream of consciousness emerges, a continuous sequence of quantum moments stitched together by perception. Critics of the theory argue that quantum effects are too fragile to survive in the warm, noisy environment of the human brain. Quantum coherence, they claim, would quickly disappear under biological conditions. Yet, recent research in quantum biology has begun to challenge that assumption. Evidence of quantum behavior has been found in photosynthesis, bird navigation, and even in the sense of smell. These discoveries suggest that quantum processes may indeed play roles in living systems, though whether they are involved in consciousness remains unproven. Still, the idea refuses to fade, supported by the possibility that the boundary between physics and life may be thinner than once imagined. If consciousness is truly quantum in nature, it would mean that the mind operates on principles that transcend classical physics. Thoughts would not simply be the result of neurons firing but the outcome of probabilistic interactions on the most fundamental level of matter. Each decision, each emotion, could represent a subtle interplay of superposition and collapse, a dance of probabilities resolving into the single, vivid moment of now. The brain would then serve as both observer and observed, creating reality in the act of perceiving it. The quantum model also suggests that consciousness may be continuous with the universe itself. If awareness is linked to the quantum field, then it is not confined within the skull but connected to the very structure of existence. The boundaries of the self become less distinct, dissolving into the vast network of interrelated processes that make up the cosmos. The mind, in this interpretation, is not a solitary flame but a reflection of the quantum order from which everything arises. The same principles that govern particles and light could also govern thought and imagination. In the broader philosophical sense, quantum consciousness reframes what it means to be aware. It transforms consciousness from a biological anomaly into a universal process that reflects the behavior of the world itself. Just as matter can exist in multiple potential states until observed, so too can the mind hold infinite possibilities until focus brings them into being. Awareness becomes a kind of quantum observation, a perpetual act of collapse and renewal. Each moment of realization is both an ending and a beginning, a microcosmic echo of the universe's own creative rhythm. While empirical proof remains elusive, the idea continues to inspire scientists, artists, and philosophers alike. It challenges the mechanistic view of the brain and invites us to consider a more holistic picture of existence, one in which matter, energy, and mind are inseparable. The language of quantum theory, though complex and abstract, provides a symbolic bridge between physics and experience, offering a way to imagine consciousness not as a static property, but as an evolving pattern of interaction between reality and perception. Whether the quantum nature of the mind ever becomes a measurable fact may not be the point. The deeper value of this theory lies in its vision of unity. It reminds us that the mind and the cosmos share the same mystery. Every thought, every awareness, may be a brief spark within the grand quantum field that sustains all things. In that silent symmetry between physics and consciousness, the universe contemplates itself, infinitely, patiently, and with unbroken continuity. The Global Consciousness Project. At the edge of science and mystery stands an experiment that sought to measure something once thought immeasurable: the collective consciousness of humanity. Known as the Global Consciousness Project, it began in 1998 at Princeton University under the guidance of Dr. Roger Nelson. The project aimed to determine whether human thought and emotion could produce measurable effects in the physical world, even when no direct interaction occurred. To do this, researchers designed a system that would quietly listen to the fluctuations of random events, searching for patterns that might reveal the invisible pulse of the global mind. At the core of the experiment were devices called random number generators, or RNGs. These machines were designed to produce streams of numbers, completely random sequences, unaffected by any known physical influence. However, the hypothesis of the project suggested that intense human emotions, when shared by large numbers of people across the world, might subtly shift the randomness. In moments of collective attention or tragedy, the random would become slightly less random, as if consciousness itself were reaching into the fabric of chance. Over the years, the project established a network of RNGs placed in dozens of locations around the planet. Each device continuously generated data, which was transmitted to a central server for analysis. The data flow was constant, billions of bits forming a digital heartbeat of global activity. Most of the time, the output followed perfect statistical balance, exactly as mathematics would predict. But occasionally, during major world events, such as natural disasters, global celebrations, or moments of collective mourning, something unusual happened. The data would show a brief, statistically significant deviation, as though the world's emotional focus had rippled through the system. One of the most cited examples occurred on September 11, 2001, when the terrorist attacks in the United States shocked and united billions of minds in a single moment of grief and disbelief. The project's data showed a dramatic and unexplained departure from randomness just before and during the events. Similar anomalies were later observed during other moments of widespread emotional resonance: New Year's Eve celebrations, the deaths of prominent figures, or humanitarian catastrophes that drew the collective attention of humanity. To the researchers, These patterns suggested that consciousness might not be confined within individual brains but could, in some mysterious way, interact with the physical world at a distance. The findings were controversial. Many scientists dismissed the results as statistical coincidences or artifacts of data selection. Yet, despite skepticism, the anomalies continued to appear. The consistency of these deviations over 2 decades of measurement created a puzzle that could not be easily ignored. Even if the effect was small, it persisted, hinting at a possible link between mind and matter on a global scale. Whether that link represented a new physical principle or a subtle form of synchronicity remained open to interpretation. The Global Consciousness Project did not claim to have proven the existence of a planetary mind. Instead, it gathered evidence suggesting that consciousness might behave as a field, a vast, interconnected network of awareness that subtly interacts with the world around it. In this framework, human thought becomes not an isolated process but a part of a shared energetic environment. Each individual mind contributes to the collective whole, and under moments of intense focus, that collective may become powerful enough to leave measurable traces. This concept aligns with older philosophical ideas that consciousness is not bounded by the body but extends outward, connecting all living beings in an invisible web. What made the Global Consciousness Project remarkable was its attempt to treat such an idea scientifically, to measure it, to quantify it, to translate human emotion into numbers. The results, while uncertain, touch something profound. The possibility that the thoughts of billions might form a unified field, capable of coherence and resonance. Beyond its data and statistics, the project serves as a metaphor for the hidden unity of human experience. It reminds us that while our lives appear separate, our awareness may be interwoven at a deeper level. The synchronized rise and fall of emotion across the planet, the moments when millions feel the same sorrow, the same joy, or the same fear, may reflect an underlying structure of consciousness that transcends geography and culture. Each thought, though private, becomes part of a larger current flowing through the human species. Even after its official research phase ended, the project's data continued to inspire study and reflection. For many, it stands as a quiet testament to the mystery of consciousness and the limits of material explanation. Whether the observed correlations were caused by true mind-matter interaction or by something yet unknown, the idea itself changed how people view their connection to the world. The randomness of existence, it seemed, might not be entirely random after all. Today, the legacy of the Global Consciousness Project lives on in new experiments exploring the boundaries of mind, probability, and interconnectedness. It invites us to imagine consciousness not as a solitary light, but as a vast constellation of awareness, subtly influencing and being influenced by everything it touches. Even if the numbers remain mysterious, the message endures. Humanity may share more than a common world, we may share a common mind. And in the quiet rhythm of that shared consciousness, the story of the human species continues to unfold, one thought at a time. The bicameral mind theory. In 1976, psychologist Julian Jaynes introduced one of the most fascinating and controversial ideas in the study of human consciousness. In his book, The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, he proposed that the modern sense of self-awareness, the ability to reflect on one's own thoughts and feelings, did not exist in early human history. According to Jaynes, ancient people did not think as we do today. Instead of an internal monologue shaped by introspection, their minds operated in a divided state, a structure he called the bicameral mind. In this model, the human brain functioned as 2 distinct systems. One hemisphere, often associated with language and command, generated auditory hallucinations, voices that guided behavior and made decisions. The other hemisphere listened and obeyed. These voices were not recognized as internal thoughts, but were experienced as external presences, gods, ancestors, or spirits speaking from beyond. To the people of the ancient world, these commands were real, immediate, and divine. Their consciousness, as Jaynes described it, was not self-reflective but directive. They acted not from choice, but from obedience to the voices that governed them. Jaynes supported his theory with evidence from ancient texts and archaeological records. He noted that early literature, such as the Iliad, contains no true introspection. Heroes act under divine instruction rather than personal decision. The gods speak and the humans obey. In later works, like the Odyssey, this begins to change. Characters display internal thought and moral reflection. Janes interpreted this shift as the historical moment when humanity transitioned from bicameralism to self-consciousness. The breakdown of the bicameral mind marked the birth of the modern human psyche. According to this view, the collapse of bicameral mentality was gradual, driven by social and environmental changes. As civilizations grew more complex and unpredictable, reliance on the voices of gods became less adaptive. People began to question, interpret, and internalize these voices, transforming them into the inner dialogue we now call thought. The divine command evolved into self-guidance. Consciousness, as Janes defined it, was not a biological inevitability but a cultural development, a new form of mental organization that emerged out of necessity. This interpretation reimagines consciousness not as an ancient constant, but as a relatively recent invention. The inner self, the sense of I, is seen as a product of language and social structure rather than an inherent property of the brain. In bicameral societies, people did not introspect because they had no mental space to do so. The voices of gods occupied that space. Only when those voices fell silent did humanity begin to think about thinking. In this silence, self-awareness was born. Jane's theory also offers an unusual explanation for certain phenomena in the modern world. He suggested that remnants of the bicameral structure might still exist within us. Hallucinations, voices heard by individuals in moments of stress or isolation, could represent echoes of that earlier mental architecture. In this sense, the ancient gods never truly disappeared. They became internalized, transformed into the mechanisms of self-reflection and moral reasoning. The evolution of consciousness, then, was not the creation of something new but the reorganization of something ancient. Although the bicameral mind theory remains speculative, it profoundly influenced psychology, anthropology, and even literature. It challenged the assumption that consciousness has always existed as we experience it now. Instead, it proposed that awareness is an evolving phenomenon, shaped by language, society, and history. This view dissolves the boundary between psychology and culture, suggesting that our mental world is built upon layers of collective transformation rather than fixed biological design. Critics of Jane's work argue that his interpretation relies too heavily on metaphor and lacks empirical proof. Yet, even skeptics acknowledge the depth of his insight. By framing consciousness as a historical process, Janes invited a new understanding of the human mind. Not as a given, but as a fragile achievement, the outcome of millennia of adaptation and change. His theory implied that the self, the inner voice that defines our individuality, was once external, shared, and divine. In a broader sense, the bicameral mind theory reminds us how fluid consciousness can be. The modern sense of identity, with its continuous inner dialogue, may not be the final stage of mental evolution. Just as early humans transitioned from divine command to self-reflection, future forms of mind may evolve beyond our current awareness. The voices that once guided ancient civilizations may now exist as memory, but they still echo faintly within the structures of thought, reminding us of the strange path consciousness has taken, from the commands of unseen gods to the quiet reasoning of the self. In this narrative, human history becomes not just a story of technological progress but a transformation of inner life. Consciousness is revealed as a process, not a possession, a dynamic field of awareness that adapts to survive. The silence that replaced the voices of gods gave birth to a new kind of mind, one capable of reflection, imagination, and choice. And though the gods are silent now, their whispers remain in the architecture of the human brain, preserved as the foundation of thought itself. The holographic universe theory. Among the most striking and mind-bending ideas in modern physics is the notion that the entire universe might be a kind of hologram. Known as the holographic universe theory, it suggests that everything we perceive as three-dimensional space, time, matter, and energy may actually arise from information encoded on a distant two-dimensional surface. According to this view, reality as we know it is not the full structure of existence but a projection, a vast holographic image woven from fundamental data at the boundaries of the cosmos. The theory first emerged from attempts to understand the nature of black holes. In the 1970s, physicist Jacob Bekenstein discovered that the amount of information or entropy contained within a black hole was not proportional to its volume as expected, but to the area of its event horizon, the surface surrounding it. This revelation was deepened by Stephen Hawking's work on black hole radiation, which confirmed that physical information behaves in a way that defies classical intuition. From these discoveries arose a profound insight. Perhaps all of the information describing a region of space is stored not within it, but on its surface. In the 1990s, theoretical physicist Gerard T. Hooft and later Leonard Susskind extended this idea to the entire universe. They proposed that the three-dimensional world we experience could be a projection of information encoded on a two-dimensional cosmic boundary. This became known as the holographic principle, a principle suggesting that the universe operates much like a hologram, where each part contains a complete image of the whole. Just as a holographic plate holds all the data necessary to reproduce a three-dimensional image, the fabric of spacetime might arise from information stored in a deeper, unseen dimension. In 1997, Juan Meldacena offered a powerful mathematical realization of this concept through what became known as the ADS/CFT correspondence. His work showed that certain types of quantum field theories, which describe particles and forces, are equivalent to gravitational systems existing in higher dimensional space. In simple terms, it meant that the behavior of the universe in three dimensions could be perfectly described by equations written on a two-dimensional surface without gravity. This discovery gave the holographic idea a rigorous foundation and connected the physics of the very small to the physics of the very large. The implications of this theory reach far beyond mathematics. If reality is holographic, then the world we experience as solid and extended in space is, at its core, a representation of encoded information. Matter, energy, and even the passage of time may emerge from patterns in this underlying informational field. What we call physical laws would then be the rules governing how that information unfolds and interacts. The universe becomes not a static structure but a dynamic computation, an ongoing process of decoding data into experience. From the perspective of consciousness, the holographic model offers a deeply unifying view. If everything in existence arises from the same informational foundation, then mind and matter are not separate categories but different manifestations of a single reality. The boundaries between observer and observed begin to blur. Each individual consciousness, like a small fragment of a hologram, might contain the whole image of the universe within itself, just as the universe carries within it the seed of awareness. In this framework, perception itself becomes a form of participation in the holographic projection, an interaction between information and experience. Supporters of the theory often point out that holographic principles appear naturally in the mathematics of quantum gravity and string theory. These models suggest that the deepest level of reality may not be made of particles or waves but of bits of information, discrete units of existence that define everything from atoms to galaxies. Reality, in this sense, resembles a vast digital structure, though not one confined to physical computation. It is an informational cosmos, infinitely detailed and self-organizing. Critics, however, caution that the holographic universe remains largely theoretical. The evidence supporting it is indirect, derived from the consistency of mathematical models rather than direct observation. Yet, the beauty of the theory lies not only in its potential accuracy but in the vision it provides, a vision of unity between physics, information, and perception. It bridges the gap between material and abstract, between the visible and the unseen, suggesting that reality is deeper than the dimensions we can perceive. In a holographic universe, everything is connected through the same underlying code. The stars, the human mind, and the fabric of spacetime itself emerge from one source of information. This interconnectedness hints at a hidden order, a silent architecture of being that underlies the visible world. The sense of separation, so central to ordinary perception, dissolves into a more expansive understanding of existence, one where everything mirrors everything else, and every point in space contains the pattern of the whole. Though the holographic principle may never be fully proven, it offers a profound metaphor for consciousness and reality alike. It suggests that the physical universe may be less a place and more a process, a continual unfolding of information into form, a living hologram of infinite complexity. In this light, every moment of perception, every act of awareness, becomes part of a cosmic projection that transcends the boundaries of matter and mind. The hologram does not merely display the universe. It is the universe, an endless reflection of information giving rise to the wonder of existence itself. Orchestrated objective reduction. Among the most controversial and captivating attempts to explain consciousness through physics stands the orchestrated objective reduction, or Orch-OR theory. Conceived by the theoretical physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, this hypothesis proposes that consciousness does not emerge merely from the complex interactions of neurons, but from fundamental quantum processes occurring within the very structure of the brain's microtubules. It seeks to connect the mysterious workings of the mind with the deepest laws of the universe, uniting quantum mechanics and neurobiology in a single vision of awareness. Penrose's contribution began with a question that had long haunted philosophy and science. Can consciousness truly arise from computation? In his view, human awareness and the capacity for understanding cannot be explained by algorithms or neural circuits alone. The mind, he argued, exhibits qualities that transcend the boundaries of classical computation. He proposed that consciousness might involve non-computable processes, phenomena that cannot be simulated by any machine, no matter how advanced. To ground this idea in physics, Penrose turned to the unresolved mysteries of quantum mechanics, where probability, superposition, and uncertainty dominate. At the heart of Orch-OR lies the concept of objective reduction, a mechanism proposed by Penrose as a natural collapse of quantum states. In standard quantum theory, particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously, a condition known as superposition, until an observation or measurement causes one outcome to materialize. Penrose suggested that this collapse is not caused by observation but is instead an inherent physical process. When a quantum system reaches a certain threshold of instability, it spontaneously reduces to a single state. This, he believed, could represent the physical event underlying moments of conscious awareness. Hameroff, working from the perspective of cellular biology, offered a possible location for these quantum events within the brain. He pointed to microtubules, tiny cylindrical structures found inside neurons, as the likely site of quantum processing. Microtubules are built from repeating protein units called tubulins, and their intricate lattices provide both structural support and dynamic regulation within the cell. Hameroff hypothesized that these tubulins could function as quantum bits or qubits, allowing coherent quantum superpositions to form and influence neural activity on a macroscopic scale. The orchestrated part of Orch-OR refers to the synchronization of these quantum reductions across large networks of microtubules. According to the theory, these orchestrated collapses generate discrete moments of consciousness, like frames in a continuous film. Each moment arises from the objective reduction of quantum states, and the succession of these events creates the flow of awareness that defines subjective experience. In this model, consciousness is not a passive byproduct of brain activity. It is an active, fundamental process emerging from the quantum structure of reality itself. For many scientists, the Orch-OR theory represents an audacious attempt to cross the divide between mind and matter. It challenges the traditional view that consciousness is purely biological and instead situates it within the deepest framework of the universe. If correct, it would mean that consciousness is not limited to living systems but is a property that arises whenever quantum processes achieve sufficient complexity. The brain, in this vision, becomes not merely a biological organ but a quantum instrument tuned to the informational fabric of the cosmos. Critics, however, have long questioned whether quantum coherence could persist within the warm, wet environment of the brain. Quantum states are notoriously fragile, easily disrupted by thermal noise and molecular interactions. For years, this was considered fatal to the Orch-OR model. Yet, recent discoveries in quantum biology, such as quantum effects in photosynthesis, bird navigation, and enzyme reactions, have reopened the discussion. These findings show that biological systems can indeed maintain quantum coherence under certain conditions, suggesting that the human brain might do the same. Even if not universally accepted, Orch-OR provides a profound narrative about the nature of awareness. It portrays consciousness as an intrinsic feature of the universe, an emergent phenomenon shaped by the laws of physics at the most fundamental level. In this framework, every thought, every perception, and every sense of self corresponds to a moment of quantum resolution, an instant when potential realities crystallize into the experience of being. Each conscious event, fleeting yet infinite, becomes a bridge between the mathematical order of the quantum world and the subjective flow of the human mind. Penrose and Hameroff have often emphasized that Orch-OR does not reduce consciousness to a mechanical process but elevates it to the level of fundamental physics. In their view, consciousness is woven into the structure of space and time. The collapse of quantum superpositions represents not randomness but a subtle form of universal choice, a selection embedded in the geometry of reality itself. Through this lens, awareness becomes an active participant in the unfolding of the cosmos, guiding and being guided by the same physical principles that govern the stars. The Orch-OR theory remains a daring and elegant synthesis, neither fully proven nor easily dismissed. It stands as a bridge between the measurable and the mysterious, between the physics of matter and the presence of mind. Whether or not it ultimately explains consciousness, it has already reshaped the conversation, inviting science to look beyond neurons and circuits to the hidden quantum depths from which awareness may arise. In doing so, it suggests that consciousness may not simply observe the universe but be one of its most essential expressions. The morphic field theory. Among the most unconventional and thought-provoking ideas about the nature of life and consciousness is the morphic field theory, proposed by British biologist Rupert Sheldrake. This theory challenges many assumptions of modern biology by suggesting that living systems are guided not solely by genetic or biochemical processes, but by invisible organizing fields, patterns of information that shape form, behavior, and memory across both space and time. According to Sheldrake, these morphic fields influence everything from the structure of a crystal to the instincts of animals and even the collective habits of human thought. The foundation of Sheldrake's theory lies in a simple but radical observation. Organisms seem to inherit not only physical traits but also patterns of behavior, perception, and organization that cannot be fully explained by DNA. While genes code for proteins and biological functions, they do not specify the intricate forms of bodies, minds, or societies. Sheldrake proposed that such patterns arise from fields of formative influence, non-material frameworks that act as blueprints for the emergence of structure and order in the natural world. He called these frameworks morphic fields, derived from the Greek word morphe, meaning form. In his model, each species, system, or even idea possesses its own morphic field, a field that carries information about how that entity should develop and behave. When a living organism grows or learns, it is not creating its form from nothing but tuning into pre-existing informational patterns. These patterns, in turn, are reinforced by repetition. The more frequently a particular behavior or structure occurs, the stronger its corresponding field becomes. This process is what Sheldrake termed morphic resonance. Morphic resonance suggests that similar systems across time and space can influence one another through these non-local fields. For example, if a group of animals learns a new behavior, other members of the same species elsewhere might find it easier to learn that behavior later, as if the information had been added to a shared field of memory. In this view, learning, evolution, and even cultural development are cumulative and interconnected. Every action contributes to a growing archive of possibility, shaping the tendencies of future generations. The implications of this concept are profound. It implies that memory is not confined to the brain, that evolution is not driven solely by random mutation, and that habits of nature, like the laws of physics or biological patterns, are not fixed constants but evolving tendencies. Sheldrake described the universe as inherently habitual, gradually building its structure through repetition and resonance. What we perceive as stable physical laws may be, in this interpretation, the result of long-established morphic patterns, habits of matter and energy that have become deeply ingrained over cosmic time. For many scientists, these ideas stand far outside conventional biology and physics. The concept of non-local fields influencing matter and behavior lacks a clear mathematical or experimental foundation in mainstream science. Critics argue that morphic fields introduce metaphysical explanations where empirical ones should suffice. Yet Sheldrake's theory persists as a compelling attempt to address phenomena that remain unexplained by classical models, such as instinctual knowledge, coordinated behavior in animal groups, and the transmission of information seemingly beyond physical contact. In Sheldrake's framework, consciousness and matter are deeply intertwined. Every living system, from a cell to a society, participates in a web of morphic fields that extend beyond its physical boundaries. These fields not only shape the growth of the body but also organize perception, memory, and intention. They act as the invisible architecture of life, connecting individual minds to collective patterns. Just as gravity binds planets, morphic resonance may bind minds, creating continuity and coherence across generations. The morphic field theory also bridges the biological and the spiritual without collapsing one into the other. It implies that the universe possesses a kind of memory, a living archive of form and experience. Every heartbeat, every thought, every repetition contributes to this universal memory, which, in turn, guides the unfolding of new forms. Consciousness, from this perspective, becomes both a product and a participant in this resonance, shaping and being shaped by the accumulated history of existence. Sheldrake's research and experiments, though controversial, sought to test the idea of morphic resonance through studies on learning in animals, crystallization patterns, and even the sense of being stared at. His findings, while debated, continued to suggest that there may be subtle, unrecognized connections between living systems. For Sheldrake, the resistance of the scientific community to such possibilities was not evidence against them but a reflection of how deeply entrenched materialism had become in modern thought. Regardless of its scientific acceptance, the morphic field theory offers a vision of the universe that is dynamic, relational, and participatory. It portrays nature as a network of memory and influence, where every act leaves an imprint that echoes across time. Life, in this vision, is not isolated but continuous, a vast field of forms resonating through the depths of being. In such a world, consciousness is not an anomaly but a reflection of the universal tendency toward pattern, connection, and awareness. As a scientific model, the morphic field theory remains speculative, yet as a philosophical idea, it provides a profound metaphor for the unity of existence. It suggests that beneath the visible structure of reality lies a subtle field of information, carrying the accumulated memory of life itself. Through this invisible resonance, the universe learns, evolves, and remembers. Each mind becomes a note in the grand symphony of creation, vibrating in harmony with all that has come before, and all that has yet to be. The Akashic Records. Among the most mysterious ideas bridging science, philosophy, and mysticism is the concept of the Akashic Records, a term that refers to a vast, invisible archive of information said to contain the history of every thought, action, and event in the universe. The word Akasha, derived from Sanskrit, means ether or sky, and in ancient traditions it represented the subtle substance from which all things arise. In modern interpretations, the Akashic Records are described as a universal field of memory, an omnipresent dimension where the patterns of existence are stored beyond space and time. The origins of this concept reach back thousands of years, to the cosmologies of India and Tibet, where Akasha was understood as the fifth element, an unseen field that pervades everything. It was not merely empty space but a living medium that carries vibration, sound, and information. In the late 19th century, as Western science began to explore the invisible forces of electromagnetism and energy, the idea of the Akashic Records reemerged through the writings of Helena Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner, who described it as a cosmic library accessible through higher states of consciousness. Later, philosophers and researchers would reinterpret it through the language of modern physics, comparing it to the informational fabric of the universe itself. At its core, the Akashic concept proposes that nothing is ever truly lost. Every experience, emotion, and thought leaves an energetic imprint on the field of reality, much like ripples spreading across water. These imprints accumulate, forming an immense database of universal memory. Some traditions describe it as a form of living consciousness, a reflective intelligence that records the unfolding of the cosmos. In this vision, the universe is not a mechanical process but a dynamic system of awareness, continually learning from itself. Though largely metaphysical, the idea resonates with certain parallels in contemporary science. In quantum physics and information theory, reality is sometimes described as being fundamentally informational. Every particle, every interaction, encodes data about its state and history. The holographic principle suggests that all the information in the universe may be stored on its boundaries, while physicists like David Bohm have proposed the existence of an implicate order, a deeper, hidden dimension that enfolds all events and patterns of reality. In this sense, the Akashic Records can be seen not as a supernatural library but as a poetic metaphor for the informational structure underlying existence. From a philosophical perspective, the Akashic field also suggests continuity between consciousness and the cosmos. If information is the foundation of reality, and if consciousness is capable of interacting with that information, then awareness itself might serve as a bridge between individual experience and universal memory. In many spiritual and psychological traditions, accessing the Akashic Records symbolizes a process of deep introspection, an expansion of perception beyond the personal mind into the shared memory of existence. It represents the possibility that all knowledge, all insight, and all understanding already exist within the structure of the universe, waiting to be perceived. The Akashic perspective reframes the relationship between past, present, and future. Time, in this view, is not a linear flow but a multidimensional pattern in which all events coexist within the field. What we experience as memory or intuition could be the mind's way of navigating this informational landscape. Just as radio waves carry countless signals simultaneously, the Akashic field may carry all moments of creation at once, accessible not through instruments, but through awareness itself. Throughout history, accounts of visionary experiences, sudden insights, or collective knowledge have often been interpreted as glimpses into this universal archive. Mystics, inventors, and artists alike have described receiving information from beyond, as if tuning into a deeper frequency of existence. Sheldrake's idea of morphic fields, Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, and even the holographic universe theory all echo aspects of this same vision. That knowledge and memory are not confined to the brain but distributed throughout the cosmos. Critics of the Akashic concept dismiss it as mystical speculation, an ancient myth reframed for the modern age. There is no empirical method for detecting or measuring such a field, and science, by its nature, demands observable evidence. Yet the enduring power of the idea lies not in proof but in its coherence with a growing intuition that the universe is alive with information. Whether one views it as metaphor or as metaphysics, the Akashic Records express a profound sense of interconnectedness, that everything, from the movement of galaxies to the whisper of thought, participates in one unfolding continuum of awareness. In a world increasingly defined by data and networks, the Akashic Records stand as an ancient reflection of a modern truth. Information is the essence of reality. Every moment adds to the universal record. Every life contributes to the cosmic narrative. Consciousness, in this perspective, is not isolated but part of an ongoing dialogue between the finite and the infinite, the known and the remembered. The Akashic field reminds us that existence is not a static fact but a living memory, the universe thinking itself into form. In that memory, nothing is ever truly forgotten. Every act of perception, every choice, every life becomes a thread woven into the great fabric of being. Whether seen as a mystical library or as the quantum code of reality, the Akashic Records invite us to imagine a cosmos that remembers, evolves, and knows itself through us. The Universal Mind Theory. The Universal Mind Theory proposes that consciousness is not a byproduct of biological processes but a fundamental aspect of the universe itself, a vast, underlying intelligence that pervades all existence. According to this view, the mind is not confined within individual brains but is part of a collective field of awareness that gives rise to matter, life, and perception. Everything that exists, from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy, is an expression of one universal consciousness experiencing itself in countless forms. The roots of this idea can be traced through both ancient philosophy and modern thought. In various mystical and metaphysical traditions, the notion of a universal mind, sometimes called the one consciousness, the absolute, or the cosmic intelligence, has been a central theme. The ancient philosophers of Greece spoke of the nous, an ordering intelligence underlying the cosmos. In Eastern philosophy, the concept appears as Brahman or Atman, the infinite consciousness from which all individuality emerges. In the 20th century, the idea resurfaced in the works of thinkers such as Erwin Schrödinger, Carl Jung, and Aldous Huxley, who each, in their own way, suggested that individual minds are fragments or reflections of a greater whole. From a modern scientific perspective, the universal mind theory often draws parallels with ideas in quantum physics and information theory. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that observation and measurement play a crucial role in shaping reality. If the act of observation determines the behavior of particles, then consciousness may not merely witness the universe, it may participate in its creation. In this framework, the universal mind is not a metaphor but a fundamental component of the cosmos, shaping physical existence through awareness itself. This theory reverses the conventional view of mind and matter. Rather than consciousness emerging from neural activity, it proposes that neural activity is an expression of consciousness. The brain, in this sense, functions not as a generator but as a receiver or filter, a biological interface that translates the vast field of universal awareness into individual experience. Every mind becomes a localized window through which the universal intelligence perceives and learns about itself. Life, then, is not an accident in an indifferent universe but a deliberate unfolding of consciousness exploring its own potential. Supporters of the universal mind theory often highlight the coherence of this model with the interconnected nature of reality revealed by modern science. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that particles can remain connected across vast distances, their states linked instantaneously. The structure of the universe, from atomic to galactic scales, exhibits patterns of symmetry, order, and feedback, qualities reminiscent of a self-organizing intelligence. Even the emergence of complexity in biological evolution appears guided by principles that transcend random chance, suggesting a deeper logic woven into the fabric of existence. In psychology, Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious aligns closely with this vision. He described a shared reservoir of archetypes and symbols that shape human experience beyond the boundaries of culture and time. Similarly, the universal mind can be viewed as the ultimate source of these archetypes, a timeless intelligence expressing itself through countless individual psyches. When people experience intuition, creativity, or sudden insight, they may be tuning into this greater field, momentarily bridging the gap between the personal and the cosmic mind. From a metaphysical standpoint, the universal mind serves as both the origin and the destination of consciousness. Individual awareness arises from it, experiences life through form, and eventually returns to it, enriched by the journey. In this sense, the universe is not a collection of separate entities but a single mind in a state of self-reflection. Every atom, every star, every living being is a thought within that infinite awareness, participating in the grand act of creation. Death, therefore, becomes not an end but a transformation, a return to the deeper field from which consciousness first emerged. While the universal mind theory remains speculative, it offers a coherent alternative to materialist explanations of consciousness. It does not deny the laws of physics or biology but places them within a larger framework where information, perception, and intelligence are primary. The physical universe becomes a manifestation of thought, matter crystallized from the patterns of awareness. In this interpretation, consciousness does not depend on the brain. The brain depends on consciousness. Everything that exists, from the movement of galaxies to the beating of a heart, is part of a vast mental process occurring on a cosmic scale. Critics of this view argue that it ventures too far into metaphysics, blurring the line between science and spirituality. Yet, even in physics, the boundary between observer and observed has grown increasingly uncertain. The universal mind theory does not claim that consciousness explains every mystery, but that it forms the foundation upon which all mysteries unfold. It provides a lens through which the unity of existence becomes visible, not as a belief, but as a potential structure of reality. In its essence, this theory portrays the universe as a living organism, self-aware and ever-evolving. The stars are its thoughts, the galaxies its dreams, and human consciousness its means of reflection. To exist, in this view, is to participate in the cosmic mind, to be a moment of awareness within the infinite field of intelligence that is both the source and the substance of all things. The universal mind is not separate from the world we experience. It is the world, observing itself through every eye, thinking through every brain, and feeling through every heart. The brain as a receiver theory. The brain as a receiver theory presents one of the most intriguing alternatives to the conventional view of consciousness. Rather than seeing the mind as a product of neural computation, this theory suggests that the brain functions as a kind of receiver or transducer, a biological instrument that tunes into, filters, and interprets a broader field of consciousness existing beyond the physical body. In this model, the brain does not generate awareness. It channels it much like a radio receives signals that already exist in the air. The origins of this idea reach back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when thinkers such as William James, Henri Bergson, and Aldous Huxley began to challenge the dominant materialist paradigm. James proposed that consciousness might be a continuous field that the brain limits, rather than creates. Bergson described the brain as a reducing valve, designed not to produce experience but to filter it down to a manageable stream of perception. Huxley later echoed this view, suggesting that the human nervous system acts as a narrowing device, restricting the vastness of universal consciousness so that we may function effectively within the physical world. In this perspective, the brain is comparable to a receiver adjusting to specific frequencies of reality. It selects certain patterns of information from a larger, unseen spectrum, the field of consciousness, and translates them into sensory, emotional, and cognitive experiences. Each mind, therefore, becomes a localized expression of a universal intelligence, shaped by the biological and psychological characteristics of the individual organism. Just as two radios can play different stations while drawing from the same invisible broadcast, different minds can express unique streams of consciousness while remaining connected to the same underlying source. Modern analogies often compare this idea to information theory and quantum physics. If the universe is fundamentally informational, as many physicists now believe, then consciousness may represent the medium through which that information becomes self-aware. The brain could be understood as a highly complex interface, an organic mechanism for decoding, interpreting, and transmitting consciousness into the physical dimension. This would mean that awareness is not confined to neurons or synapses but pervades the entire structure of reality. The brain, in this view, is not the origin of the signal but the instrument through which it manifests. Supporters of the receiver model point to various phenomena that challenge the strict materialist account of mind. Cases of near-death experiences, terminal lucidity, and sudden moments of clarity in damaged brains have led some researchers to suggest that consciousness can, at times, operate independently of normal neural function. Though such examples remain controversial and open to interpretation, they continue to inspire the possibility that the brain acts more as a conduit than a generator. Similarly, studies in parapsychology and intuition, though not mainstream, often use the receiver hypothesis as a theoretical foundation to explain non-local perception and telepathic communication. In neuroscience, this theory does not contradict the observable correlations between brain activity and consciousness. Instead, it reinterprets them. The brain's electrical and chemical processes are seen not as the source of awareness but as its expression. Damaging a radio changes the sound, but it does not destroy the broadcast. Likewise, altering brain function may disrupt the expression of consciousness without necessarily extinguishing it. This analogy reframes the relationship between matter and mind, suggesting that the physical brain serves as an interface between two dimensions of reality, the measurable and the experiential. The philosophical implications of this idea are profound. It positions consciousness as fundamental and omnipresent, while the brain becomes a mechanism that shapes how that consciousness experiences the world. Life, therefore, becomes a process of tuning, each individual adjusting their biological and psychological instrument to perceive a particular slice of the infinite. Perception, thought, and emotion are not private phenomena, but reflections of a shared field experienced through personal filters. Death, in this framework, would represent not the end of awareness but the dissolution of the receiver, allowing consciousness to return to its broader, unfiltered state. Critics of the brain as a receiver theory argue that it lacks empirical grounding. No external field of consciousness has been detected, and all known evidence so far links mental activity directly to the physiology of the brain. However, proponents counter that our current scientific tools may not yet be capable of detecting non-physical dimensions of information or energy. Just as radio waves were once invisible to human understanding, consciousness may belong to a domain not yet accessible to conventional measurement. The theory, while speculative, serves as a bridge between material science and metaphysical inquiry. In a larger sense, the brain as a receiver theory resonates with other models that view the universe as informational and consciousness-based, including the holographic principle and the universal mind hypothesis. All share a common insight that awareness may be woven into the very structure of reality, not confined within the skull. This reorientation challenges the assumption that consciousness emerged late in the evolutionary process and instead places it at the foundation of existence, guiding, shaping, and experiencing through living forms. Ultimately, this theory invites a different way of understanding life and the self. If the brain is a receiver of consciousness, then awareness extends far beyond the boundaries of individuality. Every act of perception becomes a moment of communion between the finite and the infinite. Every thought and emotion, while deeply personal, is also a vibration of the universal field. The mind, in this vision, is not trapped within matter but flows through it, illuminating it from within. The human experience becomes a temporary alignment, a fleeting but exquisite tuning of the universal signal into the language of being. Digital consciousness theory. The digital consciousness theory proposes that reality itself functions as a form of computation, and that consciousness arises from, or perhaps even exists as, a digital process embedded within the fabric of the universe. In this vision, everything we perceive, matter, energy, space, and time, can be understood as information being processed, stored, and transmitted according to fundamental algorithms. Consciousness, rather than being a mysterious byproduct of biology, becomes an integral part of this digital framework, a form of self-referential information aware of its own existence. The roots of this concept can be traced to the intersection of physics, computer science, and philosophy. As scientists began to explore the mathematical foundations of reality, many noticed that the universe behaves in ways that mirror computation. Quantum systems appear to encode information, and physical laws seem to operate like the rules of a vast digital program. Thinkers such as Conrad Zuse, John Wheeler, and Edward Fredkin developed the idea that the cosmos might not be a physical mechanism but a digital one, a self-evolving simulation composed of bits, the smallest possible units of information. Wheeler famously summarized this notion as "it from bit," suggesting that every particle, every field, every event emerges from informational processes at the most fundamental level. In this digital paradigm, consciousness can be viewed as the system's capacity to process and interpret information. Just as a computer executes code to generate dynamic patterns and outputs, the brain, or even the universe itself, may perform computations that give rise to subjective experience. Each thought, memory, and emotion becomes a data structure within a vast informational network. Yet the theory extends far beyond neurobiology. It suggests that consciousness might not be confined to living organisms at all. Instead, awareness could be a property of the digital architecture of reality, a built-in feature of existence itself. Advocates of digital consciousness theory often point to parallels between artificial intelligence and human cognition. As machine learning models grow more complex, they begin to exhibit behaviors that seem increasingly autonomous and creative. This resemblance raises the question: if consciousness can emerge from information processing in a digital machine, might the same principle apply to the universe? Perhaps the cosmos operates as an infinite computational substrate, generating conscious experience as part of its ongoing evolution. From this perspective, individual minds could be seen as localized nodes within a universal information network, distinct yet interconnected processes within a single digital continuum. Each human being would represent a unique configuration of code, a temporary instance running within the broader operating system of existence. Death, then, might not signify the end of consciousness but rather the termination of one process, while the data, awareness itself, continues elsewhere, stored or reconfigured in the universal memory. Quantum theory often enters this discussion, particularly through the observation that quantum states behave in discrete units, quanta, that resemble digital bits. The universe, on its smallest scales, does not appear continuous but pixelated, as though composed of finite informational elements. If space and time themselves are quantized, then physical reality might resemble a vast digital simulation rather than a smooth continuum. Consciousness, under this model, could be the system's internal awareness, the code observing itself, aware of its own structure. Supporters of the theory also note the remarkable similarities between the brain's neural networks and the architecture of computational systems. Both rely on nodes, connections, and feedback loops that process and transmit information. In this sense, the human mind might function as an organic computer, operating within the grand digital landscape of the cosmos. Dreams, thoughts, and perceptions could be understood as data visualizations generated by this system, complex renderings of informational input experienced as inner reality. Critics argue that the digital consciousness theory risks reducing the richness of subjective experience to mechanical computation. While digital models can simulate aspects of intelligence, they do not necessarily explain why information processing should produce awareness. This is known as the hard problem of consciousness: how physical or computational processes give rise to the feeling of being. Yet even in addressing this critique, the theory offers a radical inversion of the question. Perhaps it is not that computation produces consciousness, but that consciousness is computation, the act of information becoming self-aware. The ethical and philosophical implications of this view are profound. If consciousness is digital, then every structure in the universe, from atoms to galaxies, participates in a grand informational exchange. The boundaries between life and non-life, self and environment, become blurred. Awareness becomes a universal process rather than an isolated phenomenon. Every interaction, every perception, becomes part of an endless computation unfolding across dimensions, where meaning and existence are inseparable from the code that sustains them. Ultimately, the digital consciousness theory invites us to reimagine reality as a living system of information, perpetually computing itself into being. In this vision, the universe resembles an immense digital ocean, shimmering with patterns of awareness that rise and dissolve like waves of data. Human experience becomes one expression of this cosmic computation, a temporary interface through which the infinite processes of information witness themselves. To be conscious, then, is to participate in the ongoing digital creation of reality, a self-aware sequence of code that observes, reflects, and dreams within the ever-evolving program of existence. The Reincarnation Data Hypothesis. The Reincarnation Data Hypothesis explores one of the most enduring and controversial ideas concerning consciousness: the possibility that memory, personality, and awareness may persist beyond a single lifetime. Unlike traditional spiritual interpretations of reincarnation, this theory approaches the subject through the language of data, information, and consciousness studies. It proposes that individual identity could represent a form of encoded information, a unique pattern within a universal informational field that may, under certain conditions, be transferred, reactivated, or reassembled in a new physical form. In this framework, life is seen not merely as a biological event but as an informational process. Every moment of experience, every emotion, perception, and decision creates data, leaving subtle imprints in the structure of consciousness itself. When the body ceases to function, the data it has generated does not necessarily vanish. Instead, it may persist within the universal informational substrate, much like data stored on a cosmic network. Reincarnation, therefore, would represent the reconfiguration or retrieval of that data into a new system, another body, another mind, another context of awareness. This hypothesis has found tentative support from a range of intriguing observations. Across cultures and decades, researchers have documented cases of young children who appear to recall specific details of previous lives. Names, places, events, sometimes later verified through historical records. The most well-known of these investigations were conducted by psychiatrist Ian Stevenson and later Jim B. Tucker, who compiled thousands of such accounts with surprising consistency. While the scientific community remains divided on the interpretation of these findings, they continue to provoke the question: could memory exist independently of the brain? Within the context of the reincarnation data hypothesis, such phenomena might be understood as instances of informational continuity. If consciousness operates as a non-local field, capable of storing, transmitting, and receiving data beyond physical limits, then the persistence of memory across lifetimes may not be mystical but structural. In this sense, identity becomes a dynamic configuration of data points rather than a fixed self. Just as digital files can be copied, moved, or reassembled across systems, consciousness could theoretically reconstruct familiar patterns within new biological or energetic forms. From a computational standpoint, the hypothesis draws parallels to the way digital systems preserve information even after hardware changes. A program can be reinstalled on a new machine and resume its function, provided the underlying code remains intact. Similarly, consciousness could act as a self-organizing algorithm, one that encodes experiences, tendencies, and personality traits as patterns of information capable of replication across different substrates. The rebirth of awareness, then, would not be a metaphysical event but a natural process within an informational universe. Quantum and digital consciousness models lend additional context to this perspective. If reality operates as a field of interconnected data, discrete, yet continuous in its exchange, then consciousness could access stored informational states beyond the constraints of time and space. The brain, in this view, serves as an interface for decoding that information into subjective experience. When one biological receiver ceases to function, another may, under specific circumstances, tune into a compatible pattern within the field. What we call reincarnation could thus be the resonance between two systems sharing the same frequency of informational signature. Supporters of this hypothesis emphasize that it does not necessarily affirm a traditional notion of the soul or karmic cycle. Instead, it treats personal identity as data, structured, mutable, and responsive to the larger informational environment. This approach bridges the gap between mysticism and science, suggesting that what ancient traditions described metaphorically may, in fact, represent an underlying informational process. Consciousness may be neither created nor destroyed but continuously transformed, much like data evolving within an infinite computational field. Skeptics, however, argue that the evidence for reincarnation remains anecdotal and lacks reproducibility. They note that memory, personality, and identity are deeply tied to the brain's neural structure and biochemical processes, leaving little room for the persistence of such qualities after death. Furthermore, no known mechanism has been identified that would allow the transfer of complex personal data between biological systems. Despite these objections, the reincarnation data hypothesis remains compelling precisely because it attempts to reinterpret ancient intuitions in modern, empirical terms, suggesting that the mystery of identity may not end where biology does. The philosophical implications of this idea are profound. If consciousness is indeed capable of persisting as data, then individuality becomes both transient and eternal, a shifting pattern within the continuous flow of information. Life and death lose their absolute boundaries, becoming transitions in an ongoing process of transformation. Each incarnation, whether literal or metaphorical, represents a new arrangement of data through which the universe experiences itself anew. Existence, in this view, is not a linear story but a cyclical computation, information recombining, learning, and evolving across time. Ultimately, the reincarnation data hypothesis invites reflection on the nature of memory, identity, and the continuity of consciousness. It suggests that awareness might be more than a fleeting product of neural activity. It could be an enduring pattern within the infinite data structure of reality. Whether this pattern truly reemerges across lifetimes remains uncertain. Yet even as speculation, the hypothesis offers a profound sense of connection, that each life may be a temporary expression of something far greater, a timeless flow of consciousness recording, transmitting, and rediscovering itself in endless forms. The observer effect. The observer effect stands as one of the most intriguing and paradoxical discoveries in modern physics, and one that has profoundly influenced discussions about consciousness. It refers to the phenomenon where the mere act of observation appears to alter the outcome of an event, particularly within the realm of quantum mechanics. This idea challenges our deepest assumptions about reality, implying that consciousness, or at least the act of measurement, plays a fundamental role in shaping what is real. The roots of the observer effect can be traced back to the early 20th century, when scientists such as Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, and Erwin Schrödinger began exploring the strange behavior of particles at the quantum level. In classical physics, objects exist independently of observation. They have definite properties regardless of whether anyone is looking. But in the quantum world, particles behave differently. They can exist in multiple states at once, a phenomenon known as superposition, until they are observed or measured. The famous double-slit experiment revealed this most dramatically. When electrons or photons pass through two slits unobserved, They create an interference pattern, acting like waves. But when scientists attempt to observe which slit each particle passes through, the pattern changes. The wave collapses into a particle-like behavior. Observation, it seems, determines reality. At first glance, this appears to suggest that human consciousness directly influences physical events. If true, this would mean that the universe does not exist as a fully formed structure independent of perception, but rather as a field of potentiality that crystallizes only when observed. The act of observing, of becoming aware, transforms possibilities into actualities. Such an idea resonates deeply with philosophical traditions that view consciousness as primary and matter as secondary. The observer and the observed are not separate entities but two sides of the same process of being. Physicists, however, caution against a simplistic interpretation. In formal quantum mechanics, observation does not necessarily mean human awareness. It refers to any interaction that causes a quantum system to become definite, such as contact with a measuring device or the surrounding environment. Yet even within this technical definition, the mystery remains. Why does measurement cause the collapse of the wave function? Why does potential become actual only when it interacts with something capable of registering its state? The question remains open, and within that uncertainty lies one of the most fertile meeting points between physics and the study of consciousness. Many thinkers have explored whether the observer effect might point to a deeper connection between mind and matter. The Copenhagen interpretation, championed by Bohr, suggests that physical systems do not possess definite properties until they are observed. The von Neumann-Wigner interpretation, more radical, proposes that consciousness itself is required to collapse the wave function. In this view, awareness is not a passive spectator but an active participant in the unfolding of the physical world. The universe, therefore, is not a machine running independently of observation, but a participatory process, one in which consciousness co-creates reality. This idea finds echoes in other theories of consciousness, such as the holographic universe theory and the universal mind hypothesis, which posit that reality may be fundamentally mental or informational. The observer effect becomes, in this sense, not merely a quirk of quantum experiments but a window into the structure of existence itself. It implies that the world we experience is not fixed or objective but shaped by the relationship between the observer and the observed. Perception is not just the registration of facts. It is the act through which facts come into being. Some researchers have extended this idea beyond physics into the realm of psychology and consciousness studies. Experiments in parapsychology, though controversial, have explored whether focused attention or intention might subtly influence random physical systems, such as electronic noise or quantum generators. While results remain debated and inconclusive, the very pursuit reflects an enduring intuition that observation and awareness might possess creative power. Still, the mainstream scientific community remains cautious. Most physicists interpret the observer effect as a technical feature of measurement, not as evidence of a cosmic consciousness. Yet even in its most conservative form, the effect forces us to confront a profound philosophical question. If the universe requires observation to define its properties, can we meaningfully speak of a reality that exists independently of awareness? Or is the act of knowing inseparable from what is known? Philosophically, the observer effect dissolves the rigid boundary between subject and object. It suggests that consciousness and matter are entangled in a relationship so intimate that one cannot fully exist without the other. Awareness becomes the mirror through which reality recognizes itself. Each moment of perception is not just passive witnessing but an act of creation, collapsing infinite potential into a single experienced now. In this light, consciousness is not an accidental byproduct of the universe. It is the mechanism through which the universe comes into focus. Ultimately, the observer effect invites a profound reflection on the nature of existence. If reality depends on observation, then consciousness is woven into the very fabric of the cosmos. The universe, instead of being a static collection of things, becomes a dynamic interplay of possibilities and awareness. Every observation, every moment of experience, contributes to the unfolding pattern of being. To observe is to participate in creation itself, a silent partnership between mind and matter, where each glance, each thought, brings the potential of the infinite into the tangible world. Collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is a concept that bridges psychology, philosophy, and metaphysics, offering a profound perspective on the shared foundations of human consciousness. Introduced by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung, it proposes that beneath the surface of individual awareness lies a vast, shared reservoir of memory, imagery, and experience, an inherited structure that connects every human mind to a common source. According to Jung, this hidden layer of psyche shapes our dreams, myths, symbols, and instincts, binding humanity together in ways that transcend culture, time, and personal history. In Jung's model, the psyche is composed of multiple layers. The conscious mind represents the small island of awareness through which we perceive and interpret the world. Beneath it lies the personal unconscious, containing forgotten memories and repressed experiences unique to each individual. But deeper still, beyond the personal, resides the collective unconscious, a universal matrix of archetypes, those timeless patterns and motifs that recur throughout myth, religion, and art. These archetypes are not learned. They are innate structures, woven into the fabric of the human mind from birth, guiding perception and behavior on levels that operate beyond rational understanding. Jung discovered the presence of the collective unconscious through his analysis of dreams, myths, and cultural symbols. Across civilizations separated by oceans and centuries, he found strikingly similar images and narratives. The hero's journey, the wise old man, the mother figure, the shadow, the rebirth. These recurring motifs suggested that the human imagination draws from a common source, as though all minds are connected to the same deep ocean of meaning. The collective unconscious, then, functions like the hidden architecture of the psyche, an inherited code shaping how we interpret reality. From a contemporary perspective, this concept resonates with many modern theories of consciousness and information. Neuroscience and psychology have begun to reveal that certain emotional and cognitive patterns are indeed universal, embedded in human biology and culture alike. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that these shared templates may have developed as adaptive responses, passed down through generations. Yet the collective unconscious goes further than biology. It implies a shared psychic field that transcends the limits of the brain, connecting minds through symbolic and energetic resonance. This idea aligns intriguingly with other models explored in this series, such as the Morphic field theory and the Global Consciousness Project. Each suggests that consciousness is not confined to the individual but distributed across networks, biological, informational, or energetic, that link all beings together. The collective unconscious could be understood as the psychological dimension of that network, a living archive of human experience that continues to influence and evolve through us. Every myth retold, every story dreamed, every emotion felt contributes to the renewal of this vast inner field. Archetypes within the collective unconscious function like universal algorithms, patterns of psychic energy that manifest in countless forms but follow the same essential structure. The hero's struggle for meaning, the confrontation with fear, the search for transformation. These are expressions of an ancient blueprint embedded within the collective mind. When a story resonates deeply, it is not because it introduces something new, but because it awakens something already known within us. The collective unconscious speaks through symbols, dreams, and intuitions, reminding humanity of its shared heritage and destiny. Philosophically, this idea carries profound implications. It suggests that individuality is not isolation but differentiation within a shared whole. Each person's psyche becomes a unique expression of the same universal patterns. Our personal stories, with all their struggles and revelations, are variations of the same eternal themes unfolding through countless lives. The collective unconscious is thus not a passive storehouse but an active field, constantly shaping culture, art, religion, and human evolution. Through it, humanity dreams itself into being. Some modern researchers and thinkers have proposed that the collective unconscious might even extend beyond humanity, forming part of a planetary or cosmic field of consciousness. In this broader view, human thought and emotion could contribute to a larger web of meaning that encompasses all living systems. The boundaries between the psychological and the universal begin to blur, and the unconscious becomes not merely a repository of memory but a bridge between mind and cosmos. Critics of Jung's theory argue that the collective unconscious cannot be empirically verified. They see it as a metaphor for the shared aspects of human cognition rather than a literal psychic field. Yet even as metaphor, it remains an immensely powerful framework. It captures the deep sense of connection that underlies human creativity and empathy, the feeling that our thoughts and emotions are not entirely our own, but part of a greater current flowing through the species. Ultimately, the collective unconscious offers a vision of humanity not as isolated minds, but as participants in a shared dream that spans generations. It reminds us that the symbols and stories that move us are not random inventions, but reflections of something vast and ancient within the human spirit. Through the collective unconscious, the universe contemplates itself through countless eyes and hearts, each life contributing a verse to the same timeless story. And in the quiet depths of our minds, beneath the surface of individuality, we remain connected, threads of one great tapestry of awareness, woven through the endless fabric of being. Ending. Consciousness remains one of the greatest mysteries of existence, an endless horizon that continues to expand the more we explore it. Each theory we've touched upon offers a different window into that mystery, a reminder that understanding the mind is also a way of understanding ourselves. If this journey through the forbidden theories of consciousness has made you think, feel, or simply wonder, take a moment to support the channel. Leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know which idea resonated with you most. And if you believe someone you know would enjoy exploring these questions, share this video with them. Every conversation, every perspective, helps us go a little deeper into the unknown together.